President Buhari directs repositioning of the economy to respond to the threat of COVID-19.
National Economic Council sets up committee on best ways of combating coronavirus.
First priority is to keep our people as healthy as possible by ensuring that we boost our healthcare facilities.
Nigerians react to reduction of pump price of petroleum.
For this fuel reduction, we hope it remains.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our conversation on COVID-19 with a focus on managing panic and anxiety.
3 weeks after the index case of coronavirus in Nigeria was diagnosed, the number of cases now stand at 12, with 4 new cases reported in Lagos just yesterday afternoon. But with the suspected case in Katsina testing negative, of course, that's what we were told.
That's right. That's the latest information out of Katsina. And you know, for several weeks running, the federal government is taking precautionary measures to help contain the spread of COVID-19 in the country.
Yes, indeed, Kingsley. And some of the measures taken include federal government suspension of all foreign trips by public officers and civil servants, and they issued a travel advisory to citizens of the same on the same concern.
There are other measures, of course, include restriction of travel to 13 countries with the high incidence ratio of COVID-19, and those countries of course include the US, UK, and Italy and China. And this was announced by the Presidential Task Force on the control of COVID-19. The task force is headed by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation.
That's right. Lagos, Ogun, and the Ekiti states have placed embargo on religious gatherings for the next 4 weeks, while states like Kwara, Kaduna, Katsina, Kano, Kebbi, Sokoto, Zamfara have shut down schools for 30 days.
Indeed, you know, Anambra and the Federal Capital Territory had also shut down various institutions, that's to say primary and secondary schools. But yesterday, the federal government, of course, through the Federal Ministry of Education, directed that all tertiary, secondary and primary schools be closed until further notice. Now, the Senate has also announced the suspension of all public hearing as well as the closure of its public gallery. But that's not to say that the plenary wouldn't continue.
Now, the same day, Kingsley, you know, the Nigeria Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs advised all Muslims to adhere strictly to public health directives and regulation, while the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN, has declared Sundays of the 22nd and 29th March 2020 as days of prayers against the COVID-19. But I'm just wondering, Kingsley, you know, why the Christian organizations have not really decided on what to do come next Sunday with respect to worship places across the nation.
Well, you know, the Lagos and Ogun State governments have already indicated that the congregation should be no more than 50 persons at each point. And RC, that is Redeemed Christian Church of Nigeria, has also said that they're shelving some of their usual large gatherings, you know, effective this Sunday. But as you said, in terms of the Christian Association of Nigeria, there's been no directive with regard to what to do with large gatherings, usually, you know, of more than 50 persons in other parts of the country.
And some may consider 50 persons also as a large crowd, you know, if you ask me, because the transmission rate of this virus is unbelievable and uncontrollable at the moment.
It's geometric in terms of the leap that we are seeing, at least for those countries that are already heavily impacted. But we also know that the federal government has earmarked at least 1 billion naira to fight the spread of the virus, while the Central Bank of Nigeria has also set aside 1 trillion naira to keep the economy afloat and help ameliorate the impact of the scourge. But we have also seen, Kirian, that the Central Bank has also outlined 100 billion naira to help boost health facilities in the country ahead of course, any crisis arising from the coronavirus.
Yes, Kingsley, we can go on, but one thing President Buhari has done is urging citizens to take precaution and not fear on coronavirus. So now that we have 12 confirmed cases, what next? There are still going to be more cases. With all the suspensions, bannings, and shutting down, what is the impact on citizens? Is there anxiety among Nigerians, and is there anything to panic about? This is what the guests that we have assembled will be discussing as we focus on COVID-19, managing panic and anxiety. My name is Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us.
All right, I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program. Kirian, you very well know that, when people hear all the scary stories usually coming from abroad, and the perception that life is always greener on the other side, and you are seeing footage after footage of disaster, and then numbers climbing in terms of not just the spread of COVID-19, well over 200,000 now, and the fatalities also, well over 8,000. And these are for the G7 countries. That's the 7 most developed economies around the world. So the disaster is spreading. And so when you find that a storm is coming to you, what precautions should you take in terms of your mental disposition?
Exactly. In terms of traveling abroad for some simple reasons, some who have a toothache go abroad to see how they can get treated. Yet that can be done in Nigeria as well. And of course, remember one of the editions we had on this program, some persons were saying that, look, if not that this is a deadly disease, there is also a way to teach us a lesson, especially those in the African continent, that we have to buckle up and see how we can manage ourselves properly, bring about all the infrastructure we need, especially in the health sector, for instance, that we're now having bombardment.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. If you were to go abroad now, you'll find that their own medical facilities are overwhelmed. You see the visuals every now and then. So once again, we welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria, live as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're right here in our Abuja headquarters studios. In the meantime, let's get the highlights of the morning news, and here is our colleague Habiba Oladipo. Morning, Habiba.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has directed a repositioning of the economy, starting with a review of 2020 budget to reflect realities in oil and prioritizing health sector infrastructure to respond to the threats posed by COVID-19. President Buhari gave the directive after the second regular meeting of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, which also recommended securitization of government debt, design and institutionalization of a revenue stabilization program, and the imperative of cutting the cost of governance at all levels. A statement from the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, said the President agreed with the Advisory Council after a meeting at the State House on the need to prepare the country to take the necessary tough economic decisions, including impact on a national agenda for stakeholders' mobilization, bringing the National Assembly, government organs, private sector and civil society together around a program to respond to the major challenges confronting the nation. Nigeria, like every other country around the world, is dealing with the unexpected and unprecedented impact of COVID-19 pandemic. President Muhammadu Buhari administration has taken some steps to mitigate the effect on the Nigerian people. The president has already ordered restriction of travel from 13 countries, each with more than 1,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Government has also suspended visas issued to nationals of these countries. The restriction will take effect from March 20th and will remain until further notice. While Nigeria delights in welcoming the world, the safety and protection of the citizens and land must take priority. The various agencies of government, including media owned by government, have embarked on vigorous campaigns promoting hygiene measures. The presidency wishes to assure Nigerians that government is on top of the situation and there's no cause for panic. So far, measures put in place are already working efficiently, and what the country is doing has been recommended as a template. And the National Economic Council has set up a committee to look at the best way of combating the ravaging coronavirus, just as the nation records the 12th confirmed case of coronavirus. The committee would be chaired by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo and some state governors.
This was a collective responsibility for all cadres of government. Their Excellencies agreed to fund a series of urgently needed interventions, both some short-term interventions that are required for the immediate response, but some other medium to long-term interventions that are needed to provide for the control of this outbreak and future outbreaks.
In the meantime, the Presidential Task Force for the Control of COVID-19 has made further clarifications on the travel restrictions imposed on 13 countries. In a statement by the chairman of the Presidential Task Force and secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa says diplomats will be allowed into Nigeria and will be subjected to supervised self-isolation for 14 days after arrival. He also noted that Nigerians abroad who are returning home will be allowed into the country, but will also be subjected to supervised self-isolation for 14 days after arrival. Any person transiting through one of the restricted 13 countries to get into Nigeria will be denied entry into the country, except a returning Nigerian resident or diplomat. 14 critical projects aimed at enhancing development of Nigeria's national digital economy, as well as supporting efforts at securing the country, achieving self-reliance and reducing poverty, have been inaugurated by President Muhammadu Buhari. Performing the ceremony at Bora district of Abuja, the president said with the nation's budgetary projection adversely affected by dwindling oil prices, diversification of the economy is now a matter of urgency.
Of digital technologies to ensure that Nigerians in distress are only a dial away from the relevant emergency response institutions in the country. This will go a long way in supporting our efforts to improve the security of lives and property. It is part of our efforts to ensure that our youth, women, unemployed graduates, and people living with disabilities either become employees of labor or get a large number of well-paying jobs, thereby contributing to the national drive of lifting Nigerians out of poverty.
And Lagos State government have confirmed that 4 new persons have tested positive to the deadly coronavirus, bringing the total number of cases in the state to 11. The State Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, disclosed this during a press briefing on the update of COVID-19 in the state.
Our 4th case is a Nigerian male. He arrived on the 13th of March from Frankfurt to Lagos on Lufthansa, flight number LH568. If we ask you and advise you to self-isolate, please follow our instructions. Well, I have the good news to tell you that the index case has now cleared the virus. So we will check him one more time, and if he's negative, he will be discharged.
The reduction of pump price of petrol have continued to generate different reactions from Nigerians. While some motorists are heaving a huge sigh of relief, some marketers are counting their losses, even as Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation retail outlets across Nigeria records high compliance.
Reduction, we hope it remains.
This price set by the government is going to run till the end of the month. Then, on monthly basis, PPPRA is going to come up with a monthly guiding price on how much PMS will be sold. And it's going to be a reflection of what the market is doing every month.
And those are the news highlights for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley after this break. I am Habiba Oladipo. Good morning.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down. Do you have a job where you're going to?
No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Aliko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin.
You know, I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad.
As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad or even end up in prison.
My name's Mr. Muftau Abiodun Balogun. We started this business 4 years ago, and this is the production outlet where we do about 4,000 to 5,000 birds per day. With the closure of the border recently, we've been experiencing massive surge in demand. Our sales per day now is going to be between 15 to 20,000 birds. We needed to expand all avenues because of the multiplier effect it's creating. And the most interesting thing about this closure is that many of my farmers today are farmers we recruited recently, and they are young graduates. What the government is doing will lead us right. And I can tell you, if the government sustains this thing, sky will not even be our limit.
Breakfast your day, every day.
Nestle, good food, good life.
You're welcome back, and it's time for us to take some business stories. And here is our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
Following the outbreak of COVID-19, the global economy has been staggered, and price of crude oil in the global market has witnessed a sharp drop. It is not a good news for Nigeria, as current price is far below the $57 per barrel, which is the benchmark for the 2020 budget. To reflect the current realities in the global oil prices, the federal government's reduction of the petroleum pump price from 145 naira to 125 naira per litre has been greeted with commendations from industry key players.
Recognizing that the import parity price has gone down. Two, is also looking at the impact on the people and the economy. So the government is taking the right step. Meanwhile, NNPC is making its effort to put back the refineries. Possibly, if it's local production, there will be some level of reduction in the price generally because of transportation of crude to for exporting, for refining elsewhere before it's brought.
And next are the details of Thursday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you, Kunle, for that report. And next is newspaper review.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe, is right here with us in the studios for today's session. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good
Bayo,
morning.
welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we'll begin with a Blueprint newspaper. The Blueprint newspaper, just the right-hand side of the nameplate. We'll begin with the stock market loses 371 billion naira. The story is on page 34. And below that, we have reps threaten arrest of MTN, Globacom, Airtel CEOs. It's on page 15. And then below the nameplate, Senate mulls mandatory debate for presidential and governorship candidates. It's on page 5. And Trump okays chloroquine for COVID-19 treatment. You find that on page 5. And the lead story, as Nigeria confirms 4 new cases of coronavirus, Buhari's daughter goes into self-isolation after UK trip. That has 5 riders. Senate shut down, directs 12 senators to go for test. And Saruddin shelves Jumat mosque activities. INEC postpones Imo Bayelsa Plateau by-elections. Federal government orders economy repositioning. Ogun, Niger, Anambra, others close schools. Those stories on page 26 of the Blueprint newspaper. And now below the photo story on the Blueprint front page, a 2-week warning strike may turn indefinite if, that's according to ASU. Now, Appeal Court affirms Uba's victory as Anambra South Senator. Yes, the story is on page 6. Uba's victory as Anambra South Senator. And now at the bottom, Ugwuanyi seeks 23.7 billion naira reimbursement for federal roads. It's on page 17. Ugwuanyi is the governor of Enugu State. Police kill bandits, rescue 2 kidnapped persons in Kaduna. It's on page 14. Teenager bags 6 months jail for stealing motor parts in Osun State. You can get that story on page 9.
All right, so let's take a look at the front page of Punch, the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate, you have the following headlines. Hyundai set to unveil its first electric SUV in Nigeria. Hyundai set to unveil first electric SUV in Nigeria. That's page 33. $30 billion revenue leakage. Reps threaten telecoms operator CEOs with arrest. That's on page 28. No makeup exams for UTME latecomers, says Oloyede. Oloyede, Prof, is the registrar of JAMB, and the story is on page 7. And just to add that there's another story on page 24 of the Punch newspaper. And the story, of course, is indicating that the JAMB head of media stated that contrary to the rumors circulating, JAMB has not readjusted its exam timetable. It says they are proceeding apace. The story says the board has not rescheduled its examination. Has been speculated all examination will be finishing on Saturday, with only few centers in Bayelsa and Rivers that will be writing in the early days of next week. And that so far of the 1.9 million candidates who registered for the exam, at least 1.3 million have already written their exams, and the results, of course, are also been released. Ishaku returns to Taraba after 87 days in Abuja. That's on page 19. Then 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate. Polytechnic lecturers give federal government 15-day strike notice. The federal government has asked all institutions to be closed. So when will the 15 days start to run? All right. Now, reps probe disbursed 104 billion naira anchor borrowers loan. Details of that on page 30. Lead story, of course, is on coronavirus. Lagos traces 1,300 as cases hit 12, and federal government shuts universities and others. With 3 riders, says Italian who brought coronavirus to Nigeria recovers. Aisha Buhari shuts office. UK returning daughter self-isolates. Senators just back from foreign trips to undergo COVID-19 test. And just before we come to those photographs on the front page, it says COVID-19, aviation industry to lose 160 billion naira and 22,200 jobs. Mom spent 93 days in kidnappers' den. That's according to Bello. Details on page 40. And federal government plans to resettle Northeast IDPs permanently in Abuja. That's on page 9. Bandits killed 23 in Zamfara and southern Kaduna fresh attacks. Lagos explosion, another corpse recovered, 2 declared missing. And EFCC arraigns Saraki's cousin for alleged 221 million naira diversion. That's on page 13. Now you can see the photographs there. That's the latest way. That's the elbow bump. You can see the Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, and the Rivers State Governor, Nyesom Wike. That was at Government House in Port Harcourt. I like that elbow bump. But I would like to see that elbow bump between the Governor of Rivers, Nyesom Wike, and the Governor of Imo State, Hope Uzodimma. You know, there's been a spat. If they bump, I hope none of them will go to the hospital after that.
Well, COVID-19 is still dominating the stories. We reported yesterday that the cases have increased to 8, but at the end of yesterday, 4 more had been added. So far, 19 persons who had contact with the 4 new additions are now being tracked. So far, the Commissioner for Health for Lagos State, Professor Akin Abayomi, says 1,300 contacts of the persons that have been so far tested positive are being followed up through. We now have a case of imported infection as well as local transmission. The 4 new cases include a female in Nigerian who arrived from France through Istanbul. She was coming from came via a Turkish airline into the country. Another Nigerian, a male who has never traveled anywhere, is about 50 years old. He also has tested positive. The third is another Nigerian, a male who arrived from Frankfurt, Germany. And you also will recall that France and Germany are among the endemic countries that Nigeria has currently banned persons coming from those places. Meanwhile, the office of the First Lady has been shut down. This is as a result of personnel there who had just returned from the United Kingdom, and there's nobody who has been infected, but it is just precautionary measures. One of the First Lady's daughters, too, who has just returned, is in self-isolation. Update on the case in Dusima, Katsina State, that was reported. That person has tested negative. The index case that brought coronavirus to Nigeria from Milan has now tested completely negative. However, he's not to be let go yet. They is to be observed for 48 hours. And after that, he will be tested. And if the test is positive, then he will be free to go. Meanwhile, the Presidential Task Force has emphasized some certain aspects of its directives. Presently, it says that effective from Saturday, that is tomorrow, there is a ban on the entry from 13 countries will be effective. To that effect, those who live or visited those 13 countries will, upon arriving, especially Nigerians, will be subjected to compulsory tests. Nigerians arriving are not banned, but they are subject to what is described as supervised isolation. And that will be for a period of 14 days. Diplomats are also exempted, but they are to be undergo supervised isolation. Meanwhile, federal government has directed that all federal universities and unity schools should close. The FCTA authority has ordered all its secondary schools, all schools, to close by the end of this week, and therefore all schools are supposed to close. The directive is that all terminal examinations should be fast-forwarded, on all activities hurried up to ensure that there is closure. Social activities has been limited. The Lagos State and Ogun State have announced restrictions to religious activities. The Ansarudin Society of Nigeria has cancelled Friday prayers. However, at the National Mosque at Abuja, Friday prayers will hold today. Back in China, it will interest all around the world that China has reported 0 new domestic COVID virus since the case started. The president, Xi Jinping, has visited Wuhan, the hub of the coronavirus. So far, 8 persons were reported to have died yesterday. And these are persons who had been previously infected. But throughout yesterday, there was no infection in the whole of China. The situation is that China has contained coronavirus from Wuhan. And you recall that in Hubei, where the 40 million people are resident, they were all placed under restriction. They are now free and they can move to work. And for a larger part of China, the work has resumed and people are now going back to work. In all, about 3,245 deaths were recorded in China. So far, 811,000 persons were infected. The situation now is that the infection outside China, especially in Europe, has now surpassed what is taking place in China. But meanwhile, the China's concern is that it is now afraid of what it calls imported infection. And on a daily basis, about 20,000 people arrive from various flights into China. And so they are now, the worry, anxiety now is a reinfection from some of the countries around the world, ensuing from people who have been visiting China.
I'm indeed concerned about Nigeria. We just read that 12 senators have been asked to go for tests, and some persons have also been on self-quarantine, after their return from UK. You see, these people that are being quarantined, they must have had contacts before they get to their homes. Somebody conveyed them from the airport to their homes, and some of them may have been exchanging felicitations with their friends and well-wishers by hugging, handshakes, and all of that. Now, if those 12 senators have not been tested so far, as we are speaking, they are making contacts with people. So how do we address that? Because when we talk about the transmission rate of this virus, it behoves that, look, because of the number of people, person-to-person contact, yes. And that's why it is spreading.
Well, the Senate President has advised that the senators should go for tests. In fact, he didn't talk about self-isolation. Because of the anxiety and the concern, his advised that they should go for tests. And this is to ensure that they are protected, their immediate families are protected, and the persons they get in contact with are not unnecessarily exposed to that danger.
Well, Kieran, I mean, your point is noted, but I think it's useful to clarify maybe the terminology that is being used, because we have had the Honorable Minister of Health, Honorable Minister of State for Health also, and then other government officials that are involved in the efforts to contain the coronavirus. The government officials who are returning, or indeed other individuals who are returning from abroad, are not being quarantined at the moment. They are in self-isolation. It's self-isolation in their homes for a 14-day period. Now, of course, under the new arrangements, this self-isolation will be supervised. So the quarantine, of course, is then when you are then taken into a medical facility. But, as you said, it is not just the persons themselves. What about those who were involved in their ground transportation?
Exactly.
From the airport.
And even members of their family members.
Yeah, as you saw in the case of Ekiti. Ekiti. And we had raised it here, I mean, in one of our conversations that, look, how do you deal with this at the airport, considering the almost sometimes chaotic nature of taxis and cabs, the way they operate at the airport, and so on and so forth. But we just keep hoping that these things don't.
All right. If not for time, we would have discussed the issue of Trump. Okay, in a chloroquine, which is a medication that Nigeria banned some years ago. Of course, we used to use that for treatment of malaria. Okay. Now let's go to editorial. It's from the Blueprint.
Sorry, I know you're taking the editorial. The figures emanating from those who are compiling now indicate that Italy has overtaken China as the country with the highest number of fatalities arising from COVID-19. So Italy, of course, and Europe have now, as it were, virtually become the epicenter. Lockdown, in most locations, everywhere. New York and California.
Even the United Kingdom, 1,950 tested positive, and there have been 55 deaths. In fact...
No. It's over 100 deaths now in the UK, yes.
All right, to the editorial. Of course, this is going to be form part of the major aspect of our program today. Now, perish the thought on generator ban. That's the editorial. It's from the Blueprint newspaper. It's talking about the introduction of a bill seeking to ban the use of generating plants in the country. It has ruffled feathers in many circles. The bill, which has passed the first reading in the Senate, was sponsored by Senator Bima Mohammed and Maggie.
Yes, the senator from Niger South proposed that bill, as well-intentioned as the bill was, because of the consequential environmental impact of generator. However, if you look at it critically, generators became the order of the day because of the failure of public power supply. And therefore, the editorial is saying that until public power supply is restored and reliable, it will be suicidal to prohibit or ban the use of generating sets. And the editorial is saying that we must make all bold initiatives to ensure that public power supply is reliable. And therefore, then the usage of generators will become unnecessary. After all, it is cheaper to have public power supply than to run generators. So members of the public who are forced to use generator are doing it at a higher cost than they would have better preferred to use public power supply.
There's always been this perspective, that the power sector is being sabotaged by importers of generating sets. Over the years, we've heard this a number of times, the abysmal performance in that sector has always been a part of, sabotage on the part of the business, men who are involved in large importation of
Nigerians are always out with conspiracy theories. You will recall that there were huge movement of tankers for petroleum products. Again, there were conspiracy theories that they deliberately undermined the railway, which was a very positive way of safely evacuating petrol. And that was why a railway went underground for a long time. So you never can find an end to such conspiracy theories.
Bayo, we'd like to thank you. That railway thing you said, though, is debatable. Because when the late Brigadier Dr. Samuel Ogbemudia, former military governor of the Midwest,
yes,
was made sole administrator of the Nigerian Railways Corporation, yes, and he was seeking to revive the railways under the administration of General Ibrahim Babangida. He said, it was in an interview published, that, look, owners of trucks, the one we call trailers, approached him, and I said, look, congratulations, you are seeking to revive the railways, and we took facilities to buy these trucks. So when the railways start functioning very well, how are we going to repay the loans that we took? Ogbemudia said it. Bye, Atoyebe. We hope you enjoy your weekend. We're going to see you on
that's confirmation.
All right. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be dealing with how to manage anxiety and panic in the face of coronavirus.
We'll be able to unite, irrespective of tribe, religion, and culture. So we keep preaching on love. That is the only binding force. Let us love ourselves, irrespective of where the person comes from.
You are about to witness the commencement of the most stimulating and compelling contest on television. This contest is only for the strong, the intelligent, and the talented. Get ready for the Unity Challenge reality TV show. Coming soon.
Engineering skills and technology define the quality of television transmission output. Training and retraining of appropriate personnel on the management of modern equipment is therefore a key competition strategy in the dynamic television industry. NTA TV College, Jos, invites relevant desk officers to special engineering courses as follows. 1-week course on audio engineering, operations and maintenance. Date 20th to 24th April 2020. 1-week intensive course on electrical power, earthing, lighting, uninterrupted power supply UPS, inverter and solar system. Date 1st to 5th June 2020. 1-week intensive course on studio broadcast equipment and outside broadcast operation. Date 15th to 19th June 2020. 1-week course on new technologies, optical fiber, IP technologies, automation storage and wireless technology. Date 10th to 14th August 2020. The venue Venue for all courses is NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. Course fee 40,000 naira per participant, accommodation inclusive. For more inquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, Jos, training you to be the best you want to be.
Some of the girls were having difficulties in their academics, and they now decided to ask us to help out. And we've decided to teach them other things, other skills. To invest in a woman is really to invest in a nation, because the women really are the heart of the family.
This is the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, our conversation this morning borders on COVID-19, managing panic and anxiety. And of course, to set the tone for the conversation, let's take this Vox Pop put together by Oyemi Ajayi.
We should be scared. Nigeria should be scared, because it's something that we don't know what to do for now. There's no known drug to cure it. And it's because for us to be scared about it.
I'm not scared, because our leaders, the president is here, and he's supposed to know what to do.
They shouldn't be scared, only to take precaution. Yes, to what it takes to avoid the contamination of contacting of coronavirus. Yes, by not going close to the coronavirus patients.
We have to be scared, of course. Everyone is scared, not only Nigerians, all of us.
And it's something we really have to be steadfast about. And the measures that are supposed to be put in place should be put in place fast. Because if we look at what other developed countries cannot handle, and it's coming to Nigeria, that is a third world nation or a developing nation, then it's something we have to put all hands on deck. And in curbing it, I think the federal government should kind of narrow or minimize the landing points of every flight coming into Nigeria, even in spite of the fact that it has been banned. Any what are they calling it, that is operational, let it be between Lagos and probably Abuja.
Whenever you are expecting this type of phenomena, what Allah say you do. Those people in that country, they should not go to another country, they should remain in their country. Nobody will come on, and you should not go out. You should there continue praying.
It's the normal epidemic that happens in all situations. When you look at the way malaria comes into Nigeria, or when malaria was first introduced, it was very alarming, where people's life was lost. So there's nothing to scared of. It will just come and go as when the malaria come and go. Even the Ebola that came, people were afraid, but it later left. So it's normal that things like that will happen. But we should pray that it will go in the faster time.
All right, Vox Pop there from a cross-section of Nigerians on the issue of anxiety and panic over coronavirus. We have just 12 cases still in the country, but of course a number of measures are already in place. Let's welcome our guests here first in Lagos. Here first in Abuja, by the way. We have Dr. Ephraim Oluwanuga. She is a senior lecturer in psychiatry at the College of Medicine, University of Abuja, and also chief consultant psychiatrist at the National Hospital, also in Abuja. Dr. Ephraim Oluwanuga, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Also here with us, another regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, clinical psychologist, Dr. Law Mefo. Dr. Mefo, pleasure to have you around.
Thank you.
Okay.
Social psychologist.
Okay.
All right, let's go to our Ibadan Network Center where we have two guests. Let me first introduce Benjamin Osayawe Ehige, a psychology professor, Department of Psychology, University of Ibadan. So we thank you for joining us this morning on the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Also in Ibadan is Abdul Rafiu Adeniji, President, National Association of Nigerian Nurses and Midwives. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. Once again, a big welcome to all our guests. The best way to probably put this is to say, look, let's take off from Vox Pop, but we are all living in the world, and we know that the world isn't what it was like 2 months ago. You have all kinds of stories pouring in from even the most advanced countries, and then on the African continent, you are hearing all kinds of stories. So we are saying to ourselves exactly what is happening. Is the world coming to an end? As the saying goes, fatality is still below around about 9,000. But it looks like there's a heavy storm that is ahead, and this is causing quite some reactions, as it were, not just from people, but from businesses and then from governments. What is happening to us as human beings at this time on the basis of what is playing out in the health sector? Let's begin with Dr. Ephraim Oluwanuga.
Thank you. I think that what is happening now is that a new disease has been introduced into the world. A cure has not been found for it, and it is highly contagious. You cannot even determine who can transmit it to you because symptomless people can transmit. So there is fear. There is fear of the unknown. People are afraid what is going to happen to them. And then the rate at which people hear the news that this thing is spreading, they begin to fear. Probably it's just a matter of time before it gets to their own neighborhood. There's also fear about people. People worry about resources. Are they going to say all of us should go home? Are all the shops and banks and everywhere going to close? What's going to happen to us? So that fear is there. And then there's also fear. People will be wondering, so how, even if this thing happens, how am I going to pay? Am I going to need to pay for medical bills for myself and my family? Lots and lots of things like that can make people afraid. And then another emotion people experience is anger. People are feeling angry. How did this thing happen? Why did somebody bring it to our country, etc., etc.? People don't even know what to do. So lots of mixed emotions at this time.
Yes, mixed emotions in a situation that human beings find extremely difficult to handle. Even the developed nations are having the heat more than the developing nations. And of course, the WHO has also warned that Africa should prepare for the worst because of the high rate of transmission from person to person. And as we discussed earlier on this program, based on precautions being taken by Nigeria as a nation, shutting down our airport was one of the first that many Nigerians wanted to happen. It didn't happen, but then measures have also been taken at that in the aviation sector, because that is an imported disease that everybody has agreed to. And what is new now is that it is now being imported by Nigerians themselves who traveled abroad and who are just coming home, which is normal. Dr. Mafo, talking about anxiety, about the panic, the unknown, Dr. Oluwanuga said, what will be your thoughts in terms of how Nigerians should address this? Because we're not talking about the psychology of the situation. And of course, if it's not properly managed, it's going to be a very big blow. So in your thoughts, what should be our reaction? How do we begin to, assimilate the fact that, look, this is here with us? How do we get on living while the coronavirus is still with us?
Yeah, for me, I think the expression of anxiety, fear of the unknown, uncertainty, our response to it, so far, not too bad. I wouldn't recommend that we overreact. That would be an overkill. Because if you drive people into panic response, we are going to face much more, worse situation that we are facing at the moment. Yes, it is real. Up to 11 or 12 cases are already confirmed in Lagos alone. And because Nigerians are very widely traveled people, you cannot, correctly assume that the case we have in Nigeria reported is just 12. It's very likely to be more than that. And it's just that enough tests may not be going on, and people may be doing self-medication because of the stigma attached to issues like that. So they may, be treating themselves the way and the much they can. On the whole, I think that, yes, we have a grave situation at hand. We must accept that. But it will not be right for us to assume that we cannot get over this. Nigeria defeated Ebola, right? If we work together, I'm sure we can get over this. It's a global concern anyway. And bigger industrialized, countries are really hit. In fact, Africa, not just Nigeria, Africa as a continent is the least affected, going by the statistics we've seen so far. But that is not to say that the situation may not escalate in Africa. Because if you check the trend, look at what has happened in China, where it all began. China is recording zero rate infection, new cases, as at now. So it means that even the China that started the problem is already exiting. And other parts of Europe and America, haven't shown the same kind of a response as China has shown. So what I'm trying to say is that if we do more in terms of tests, as far as I'm concerned, whoever enters Nigeria from anywhere should be tested on arrival. I don't know how much that is going on now. And I don't think that even if it is going on, that is comprehensive enough. They may be targeting specific countries, but that may be an illusion. Because if you look at it, you have the flights you use, they are internationally connected. So, the takeoff point, the point of entry into Nigeria may not have, originated from the country you suspect. They move from place to place. The point I'm trying to make is that we need to be a lot more proactive in terms of testing. What I see is they check the temperature, right? See if it's big, but symptoms take time to really manifest. Up to 12 days, I understand. And if that is the case, it means that symptomless individuals may actually be carriers, and they can transmit before the symptoms emerge. That means you must test at the point of entry, no matter the country you are coming in from. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, Dr. Mefo, thanks a lot. I mean, this latter point that you just raised, we will need perhaps to restate this, because this week we had the Honorable Minister of State for Health, and then just yesterday we had the Minister of Health. I mean, we're having for the second time in as many weeks. We also raised the question about testing, why we are not having mass testing, as it were. And he said, look, the facilities you need for testing, particularly the reagents and other things, they are scarce around the world now. Because even countries that are advanced and rich, like the U.S. is not undertaking mass testing of persons, and there's quite some scarcity of these reagents. So it is when cases where the suspicion is strong that the person has symptoms of coronavirus, that you then go into testing. They are shopping for testing facilities and equipment together with reagents, but you don't just burn yourself out now, because but that's why the recommendation is there for, look, self-isolate for 14 days, even though there is also that gap that, look, ground transportation staff may have taken you to the airport, and if your symptoms didn't manifest at that time, and if symptoms manifest later, what then happens? But those are worst-case scenarios, Kieran, I believe.
Yes.
I want us to go to Ibadan Network Center. Professor Benjamin Higea, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Ibadan. Let me ask you this question. I mean, what is your reading of our national psychology and indeed of global psychology in the face of the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, if we look at it from psychological perspective, anxiety and panic, which we are discussing now, these are emotional states of individuals. And emotions usually emerge from consequences of our cognitive processes. And as such, from psychological perspective, I want to say that the state of anxiety of individuals in Nigeria presently can mostly be associated with cognitive processing of information we have been receiving. And we know Nigeria, being what it is, we receive information from different sources. Some of these sources are not authentic. Some of these sources are not credible. But there's this tendency, especially with the availability of social media, for information to be disseminated across the nation. And this is the major cause of anxiety and panic amongst us. Moreover, when we consider the type of information, the sources of this information, we ought to rely more on credible sources. And well, I wouldn't say that I know to a large extent how measures have been taken care in terms of reducing all these negative sources of information. And we discover that most times people enjoy disseminating threatening information that could totally destabilize people. And these are the things that I would say are strongly responsible for the state of anxiety and panic amongst us. And again, when we reflect our minds to previous occurrences, like the case of Ebola, even HIV virus, we see that post-traumatic stress disorder comes into place in terms of determining our perception of this COVID-19 virus which we have. Because Nigerians now, we are familiar with occurrences with Ebola, occurrences with HIV, these tend to motivate us into having a futuristic view of possible consequences of this COVID-19 virus. And that is why people are just reasoning, associating what had happened before to the present, and as such people want to take steps, and at times they get involved in steps that will hinder their psychological state. So that is what I will say for now.
Thank you for saying just that. I will still come back to you as we make progress in this discussion. Let's remain in Ibadan and ask Abdulraif Adeniji some question. Sir, give us a sense, if you could, of what should be the psychology of the medical staff that we have in Nigeria. Going by some of the information that we had from different parts of the country, there are the frontliners, and they have a good number of staff, in that process. Of course, we know that the man who mooted the idea of a strange strain in China in December also died of coronavirus. There are also many medical workers who have, paid the price, the ultimate price, in trying to save other people's lives. And with that kind of information in Nigeria at the moment, let us have an idea of the psychological preparedness of those in Nigeria who are medical staff and who, may have to face the same kind of situation that their counterparts face in other parts of the world where coronavirus is hitting so hard.
Thank you. The issue of coronavirus, the panicking and anxiety that follows does not exclude health workers. The doctors, the nurses, the lab scientists, the pharmacists, and all other persons, even including health attendants. As a frontline health worker, when being trained, one is trained to face both comfortable situation and adverse situation. However, in this case of coronavirus, what readily comes to mind is what is the environment, what are the infrastructure, what are the equipment provided by government. If all these things are there, this is the wartime of the health workers. And as a calling, all health workers are prepared to save others, but not to the extent of sacrificing their life. Coronavirus or COVID-19 is a viral disease, and even the news at all is scaring people. But as the psychology of an health worker is that where others are losing their head, you must hold your own. But Nigerian situation calls for very serious attention. This is what is revealed even by the Honorable Minister of Health. Testing kit is not even sufficient. I am sure that most of the hospitals are not prepared with the absence of adequate PPE, the personal protective equipments, the wares, the chemicals that are expected to be used. As we are talking today, there are hospitals where there are no running waters, and then we want to fight coronavirus. The psychology of health worker, though prepared to do what is expected, has to be boosted by not only the government, even the news that are being carried. Just like my previous speaker have said, many people spread fake news, and this is enough to even threaten the reliability of health workers. Another case is that we need to look into is that when Ebola came to Nigeria, there are people that died. Up to present time, the government has not even paid lip service to some, while they paid to others. This is a case by which somebody will be thinking that if I have to face this disease, and if anything happens, is there insurance for the health workers? Will the people they leave behind be taken care of? In Nigeria, we are aware that our public health system is being challenged now. This is a test, and this is where we have to call on everybody that has to do with healthcare financing management and policy planning to ensure that when planning of this nature is coming up, the people who are key in the preparation or intervention of this viral disease should be carried along. They know where it pinches, and they are the one who can suggest practical way out. With all these things put in place, people, health workers, will be prepared to face whatever calamity that is coming. However, it is not to the extent of sacrificing their life. And this is where the issue of equipment and calling on people, even healthcare professionals, to not only wait for government, we should also provide what we can provide for ourselves, like disinfectant, the glove, the mask, and all other things that will make you prepared. And the families as well has to be prepared. Otherwise, a health worker can become a masquerade in the family or in the public in the face of this viral disease. On the whole, the psychology of health worker in Nigeria is that they are prepared to work. But everybody, including government, private sector, religious institution, we must be able to boost this morale.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, Abdul Rafiu Adeniji, for your comments. We'll return to you, gentlemen, in our Ibadan Network Center. Let's come back here to Abuja. I mean, a number of points have been raised in terms of the mixed emotions in circulation. We talked also about, you guests have also talked about the global village phenomenon. Professor Hige was mentioning that to say, look, people have access to multiplicity of sources of information, and the social media, of course, unfortunately being sometimes drivers of fake news and then anxiety. But he also mentioned something that part of what is fueling all of this is a futuristic view of the consequences of this unknown disease. How might Dr. Ephraim Oluwanuga, how might this be tempered, I mean, with the individual. There's no way you can shut yourself out of news, of information, in the age of information itself. But that then leads you to dreaming up all kinds of doomsday futuristic consequences of the coronavirus. How do you now balance this in your head individually, and then of course as a community, so that we can begin to downscale the sense of anxiety and panic?
First of all, I would like to say that there are a few things that every individual should avoid in terms of their thinking process. And I'll just give two examples. It's very dangerous for a person to have a kind of anchor mentality. That is, I have heard one fact about this virus, and that every other thing I hear doesn't concern me. This particular fact, I've heard it. For example, I've heard it kills people. It kills many people. And then somebody holds on to that for every other thing that people are saying. I just have this thing kills people. So that is a faulty way of thinking. Another faulty way of thinking is believing only a certain set of facts known to you. For example, if somebody says, well, you know, smoking is harmless because I know a man who smoked till he was 95 and he was well till the last day. You know, that's just a small set of facts known to you. So if a person now decides to just gather some set of facts or known to them, maybe some experiential thing, they are likely to be able to absorb other information that could have mitigated their fear and their anxiety. So at this time, it's important to be broad-minded. It's important to be properly informed. Instead of listening to things that are flying around on social media, people should take time to visit official websites like that of our own NCC, for example, our National Disease Control Commission. Visit that website. Listen to things that you are hearing on credible stations like NTA. Don't go and just start looking for something on the web that is on research. Now, some people are running around to buy chloroquine because they say they've heard that it's going to help and they are stockpiling it. You know, so it's very important to get properly informed, because information will always empower a person. And communally too, it's important that we get the right information. We need to get information out to the people. I hope that all these things we're saying in English, people are telling our people on radio everywhere in other languages, the language that they understand and the media that they use, so that people can hear. And that includes even the young people, even children. There's a way to communicate things to children. There's a way to communicate it to teenagers and so on. And this is a challenge to those of you in the media to please help us to make sure that various groups of people, classes of education, social, economic, and so everybody gets to get the right information.
Yeah, now we are talking psychology for real, and you talked about broad-mindedness, and that is, of course, a function of information and communication. The more information you get, broadens your understanding of the entire concept. And, of course, information on this virus, Dr. Mafo, is actually shaping the emotional status of the individuals.
Yeah.
And what are more thinking fault lines on the part of individuals that should be properly managed before it takes them to a panicky level?
It's important to get our people to be a bit more optimistic, right? This is not apocalypse, right? It's not doomsday. It's not Armageddon. At least not yet. And even if it's going to get to that level, right, we should take on this situation with a measure of boldness, courage, and fighting together. We talk about social distancing. I think it's up to 6 feet, right? Away from, that's a lot of pressure. And you see the way we shake hands now. We do it with the elbow or with the leg, right? These are new things coming on. And I see the way some Nigerians take it, with some sense of humor. That's a good one, right? And it's also bringing in and on fresh realities that our social space is changing. Now, it's a fault line if you leave it at that physical level alone. There are ways you can psychologically bridge the gap, right? Communication. We need to stay with one another, right? Even if we are physically separated, we should be able to communicate. And modern days communication system is such that you have so many ways you can do things now. You can WhatsApp, you can send the text messages, you can make the phone calls, and so on and so forth. The point I'm driving at is this, that the distance, that is physically imposed on us now must be bridged psychologically, creatively. We should be able to stay together with one another. You should be able to reach out to your family, wherever they are, through telephone calls. Give one another hope. This is the time we have to stay together. And, we have already established one fact, that you have anxiety, you have panic, you have all sorts emotions that are negative. They are all, negatively impacting on us as individuals, as a society. And anxiety is fueled by uncertainty. There is that direct correlation. And anxiety is also at the root of depression. Depression is a very terrible, a mental condition. It starts from the mild and can get to the clinical stage if it is not well mitigated in good time. One essential point is this. We must see that this has come upon us, right? China is already exiting. If China that started it, is already coming out of it, that is enough hope for the rest of the world to know that if we take enough measures, we should be able to also exit, like China is doing at the moment. One thing I don't understand is the recovery rate of China compared to countries like Italy, and so on and so forth. I don't know if there is something China is not telling us. I don't know if there is something they are not sharing with the world, because their recovery rate is phenomenal compared to other countries that inherited this problem from them. What I'm saying is that, by and large, there is proof that we can exit this. China is an example that we can exit this. In fact, what China is worrying about now is reinfection, right? People coming into China, bringing it, and that may result in what we call fresh infection. That is what China is worrying about now, and not even about the original case. We can. Let us stay together on this. We will defeat, a coronavirus the way we defeated Ebola. That's where I stand. All right,
Dr. Lamefort, thank you very much. I mean, you raised, among other issues, the question of how China has recovered, but we must also remember that this first broke out in China in December. And so if you're talking about exiting it now, there's a 3-month window, and we have seen some of the extreme measures that they have taken. Tens of millions of people, tens of millions have been on lockdown for several weeks. And we see the fumigation that they've been undertaking. Italy didn't begin its lockdown until a few weeks ago. And Italy has already surpassed China in terms of the rate of fatalities. And the index case that we had here came from Italy. And of course, in the US, it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago, recently, that President Trump acknowledged that indeed this was real, and they now started taking their own measures. So, of course, but the key point you make is that, look, China, with over 1 billion people in terms of population, and the epicenter of this affliction is already emerging out of it, then there should be hope for all of us. But I want to return to our Ibadan Network Center. Professor Ehige, one point. Now, we have seen a lot of precautionary measures being imposed by the Nigerian government. Travel restrictions, advisories on social distancing and communication. And of course, by yesterday, the federal government has already given the indication that, look, all schools, primary, secondary, and tertiary, should close in order to prevent community transmission of the virus, assuming it's out there. How does one psychologically process the fact that these precautionary measures, helpful as they are not an indication of some looming doomsday?
Well, you are quite right, especially in the political terrain we are into in Nigeria. Some of these consequences have dread effects upon the individuals. And as such, I would want to encourage individuals to see more of possible positive outcomes of these decisions. But again, when some start interpreting it wrongly, so to say politically, it may endanger the intention of the government towards the reduction of the spread of this virus. But in all, I will say that compliance to these instructions relies more on the individuals. Well, many social gatherings have been stopped. The institutions, higher institutions, they have been sent on compulsory holidays and so on. But these people are going back home. What about the movements at home? Would this be curtailed? Is there no high tendency when people are sitting idle? Then it's a common saying that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. With some negative social vices will not emanate from these actions. These are some of the questions that come to mind. Would some other people not want to interact indiscriminately, even especially if they identify some symptoms within them based on their self-assessment? And we see some people, they are so, I don't know how to call it, so wicked, and when they observe it, some have the mind that if I suffer this, I shouldn't suffer it alone. Other people have to suffer along with me, and they then go about visiting friends and so on. These are some challenges we'll be facing. But again, we also have this psychological torture of the social anxiety disorder, in the sense that we based on our communal living. We are used to living, visiting, and so on. But all of a sudden, as a result of this virus, all these restrictions will be in place. How many Nigerians will have an in-depth understanding of these restrictions? Will some older ones not believe that their children are no longer visiting, that there are some things are happening which may have psychological torture upon them? Now, some of the behavioral processes that have been put in place in curtailing this virus, would they not lead to some higher level psychological consequences? For instance, something like obsessive compulsive behavior. Now we are told that you wash your hands and so on. It means wherever you are going, people start thinking, have I not touched the untouched? Should I not go and wash my hands? Some might wash and they might not remember again, and they say, oh, I have not washed. These we have ways of affecting our behavioral activities as well as our cognitive activities. So Nigerians are presently faced with a lot of challenges. Now, schools have been placed on compulsory vacation. Meanwhile, even the Academic Staff Union and some other unions are on strike and threatening to go on strike. Some are even saying politically that because of the strike, the government is trying to cover up by now introducing closure of schools so that at least the ASUU strike will not be seen as a negative aspect of the government action. So a lot of interpretations are in place where we just pray that God will give us the understanding and will help us to accept the reality. Because where people do not accept the reality, it becomes very much difficult for the advantages and the credit that ought to be gained from some of these government policies to be accepted and to be reacted towards the way it ought to be.
Nigerians are very religious people. But on this occasion of coronavirus, well, of course, we have to learn that such viruses are treated with medication and not prayer sessions and what have you. It has never happened anywhere globally because, as he was saying, some individuals could just take some stand as to say, this is what my pastor told me to go and do, and I may get better after that. It's not going to work this time around. We remain in Ibadan, and let's talk to Abdul Rafi once again. Adeniji is the president of National Association of Nigerian Nurses and Midwives. I'm still concerned about the first responders in case of any eventuality, and who are your people, the nurses, the midwives, doctors, in fact, the health workers, generally speaking. Well, you raised some important points when you were making your initial statement, and you talked about provision of facilities, equipment, and you also said that your members could as well help themselves by procuring some of the things they need to work with, like the mask, the gloves, and what have you. Now, are you talking to government in this direction? Government of all these states of the federation, because you are a national body, which means that you have your people in every part of the country. Are you people talking to the government in terms of psychological preparedness, of your men and women, in case of any escalation, which of course we don't pray for?
Thank you so much. I think Nigeria must learn from the World Health Organization approach to this issue. One thing is that if somebody is doing something good, we need to acknowledge and appreciate that person. One must not forget the comment of a highly placed Ministry of Health official when the Lassa fever killed some people in the eastern part of the country, shifting the blame on the health worker themselves. But when you listen to Dr. Tedros, the WHO Director General, he was by every day sending commendation to the health workers, because we see health workers, nurses, doctors, lab scientists, and the rest of them as soldiers in the war front during the outbreak of diseases. We are encouraging government by the day, and it will be better for the government to learn from what is happening now, because as a professional association, we have a lot of recommendations for government that are not being implemented or even looked into at all. Take, for example, the issue of an hospital without a running water. Washing of hand for this issue of Ebola is not about getting a bowl, put your hand in there, and start washing. It is better to wash your hand. We say for around 20 seconds. The time it will take you to say, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. But in most of the hospitals today, the water there is not running. If the water is running, what is the quality of the water? In essence, as a professional association and as a trade union, we have always been a collaborative agent to government. But all we need to say here is that government should at least listen to some of these advices before this kind of a thing come into being. For example, we are talking about primary health care. Most of these cases will first go to the primary health care. Today in Nigeria, what is expected to be that about 70% of health cases should go to primary health care. People have lost interest in primary health care, and one of the reasons is that there are no adequate manpower, human resource development for health in primary health care. Many people are now queuing at the teaching hospital, and this is an inverted pyramid. It will rather complicate matters for us. Not only this, we are talking about policy. When formulating policies, let everybody that matters be informed right away from the beginning, so that whatever policy we want to evolve at the end of the day will be an all-encompassing one, and it will have been tested along the line. When talking about this as well, we're talking about what are the rights and privileges of health workers. Most that we have in Nigeria today is that government will just, if there are strikes like the one that is there now, they will just do a measured window dressing. Agreement are not being followed. All these things are what the labor union and professional association have always been calling on government. Take for example, National Association of Nigerian Nurses and Midwives. We have always called on government. The primary health care is in short of manpower. And Nigeria as a whole is suffering aging workforce in health sector. In the next 3 years, more than 30% of experienced health workers will be retiring. In the next 5 years, when you take the statistics, most of the experienced health workers will have retired. Not only that, government is not doing adequate recruitment. There are some measures that are even sending these people away from the country. And all these things have to be taken into consideration. All these...
I'm wondering, Abdulrafiu Adeniji, please, I still want to stay with you while we are on the issue of caregivers. Abdulrafiu, if you can hear me. Well, Abdulrafiu, I said I want to stay with you, gentlemen, at our Ibadan Network Center. And my question is actually going to you. Now, I mean, we understand that there's some technical glitch. Well, of course, that has been cleared up now, Kirian. Yes. So let's return to Abdulrafiu. Abdulrafiu Adeniji, I want you to respond to this. We've listened to the points that you have raised, but in the context of the coronavirus, there was the reported incident of a 70-year-old woman who had symptoms of coronavirus, allegedly, and was taken into isolation in Enugu. And unfortunately, I mean, she passed away, not on account of coronavirus because she tested negative to coronavirus, but according to the daughter, and this message circulated widely, the woman was treated shabbily at the isolation center, and fingers are pointing to nurses, you know, that the woman was treated as an outcast, and that message, of course, has gone viral. And some persons will say, look, this relates to the attitude of caregivers, particularly nurses. And what the Enugu state government has done has been to close down that isolation center and relocated it to a ward or a wing of the Enugu State University Teaching Hospital, also in Enugu. How do you respond to this in terms of the attitude of some of your colleagues in dealing with this kind of situation?
Thank you. Let me start first and foremost by appealing to every Nigerian nurses and all other workers as well, because anywhere we get to today, if anything happens, it is the name of the nurses that we mentioned, probably because we are at the center of every activities. I'm using this opportunity to appeal to us. I am not saying we should sacrifice our life while we have options to stay alive. Like we are talking, we know that there are no adequate motivation, there are no equipments. But like I said the other time, we must do everything as a calling because we have a contract, not only with ourselves and God, with also the people we are treating. It's a lifelong contract, and we must do it as our services to humanity. And in doing this, we should be able to bring any inadequacies to the professional association desk, who will be able to discuss directly with government, not only when the diseases are around, but even before that time. I also calling on administrators of hospitals to also know that these people are the ones that are 24/7 in contact with any case, and we must be able to do well by acknowledging them and making sure that they are not just being treated like anyone. No nurse have the responsibility, have the right to treat any patient casually or with neglect. But let me also ask that Nigerians must be careful of mixing the role of a professional together. Like a nurse have 3 bound roles of independent, dependent, and interdependent roles. The independent one are the one that a nurse can carry out without anybody's supervision or prescription. The interdependent one are the one that can be done within the doctor, the nurse, the lab scientist. And the dependent one are the one you need to wait for other people to act before you also act. Take for example, a case that has not been actually diagnosed, we need to work with care. I'm sure that that hospital will not have adequate equipment, PPE, mask, and everything. But we must do everything possible by keeping a distance and try to care for these patients. Equally, as regards that woman, all over the world, we are aware that two conditions are very serious. The people who are old, the young ones. So also people who have comorbid conditions are people with immunodepressive situation. If such a person comes to the hospital, of course, the outcome of that thing, if without even coronavirus, is that the chances are very, very low. However, just like it has been said, it's a call on all Nigerians to know the role of a nurse and what is not the role of a nurse, and then to encourage each other in this regard. Most often, there are underrating of nurses and their roles in the hospital. Some people even over-evaluate the role of a nurse, and as a result, when the doctor does not come, when the lab scientist has not come up with the lab result, it is always the nurse who is the first contact. In fact, in the primary health care, when some people who are not nurses and are employed to do the work of nurses are functioning, it is the nurse that the populace will mention in the whole. We need to understand the system and then encourage the people that are working. As the national president of Nurses and Midwives, I'm using this opportunity once again to tell our members that this is what a warlike situation, and we must face it like that. We must sacrifice whatever we want to sacrifice, but not to sacrifice our life. Do every precaution as a professional, and then you will go without any form of infection or reinfection or a form of disability.
Thank you very much, Adeniji, the president of the National Association of Nigerian Nurses. Actually, the Enugu incident, caught the medical professionals unawares, and you can imagine the kind of panic that ensued in that hospital the first time it was detected. Some persons had to run away. It was a kind of a panicky situation. As to look, these persons, people ran away from her at the initial stage, and you may not just completely blame it on the workers who may not have, like you said, the apparatus to wear, like the mask and all of that at that point. But it has been a good point that look, they should respond as first responders when it comes to caregiving. Now, let's come back to Abuja here. Dr. Ephraim wants to respond, or rather to make a good contribution on that question.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to observe that there is no psychological preparation of the medical staff in general. Little or no psychological preparation. People hardly think about the psychological impact of this disease. And as a matter of fact, we're dealing with two pandemics at the moment. There's a pandemic of the virus, and then there's a pandemic of fear and anxiety in society and among even the caregivers as well. People are anxious. So it's very important that steps are taken to psychologically prepare everybody working in the health sector now to cope with handling these matters. And that brings me to the second thing I would like to say. Health is on our concurrent legislative list. And so local government, state government, federal government, they all have their own health institutions that they run and are responsible for, even though federal government directs the policy. Unfortunately, there's a very wide gap between what is available at the local government level, at the state level, and at the federal level. There's a very wide gap between what happens when you go to a state hospital and you go to a federal teaching hospital, for instance. And it need not to be so. All tiers of government need to wake up to their responsibility. I think somebody has mentioned it here on this program today. Imagine if somebody with COVID-19 goes to a primary health care center today. I don't think that they are likely to get a lot of help in terms of, first of all, testing. I doubt that there's any testing available now in local government, in primary health care centers. And then in terms of the care that they will get, yes, yes, we know people should recognize and they should refer up. But imagine a person who goes now, sits in a primary health care center with 20 other people, and they're all seated, packed on benches. By the time he leaves, even the people who did not go there with COVID will not go home with COVID. So I think that this period is a time for us to take a holistic review of our entire healthcare system. I'm very happy to hear that money is being allocated to deal with it, but I hope that a lot of this money will go into putting long-term sustainable things in place. The president of the Nursing Association has mentioned it twice. It's terrible when there's no running water in hospitals. It's terrible, but it should only be in hospitals. There should be running water in the primary healthcare centers. There should be running water anywhere somebody goes to access healthcare, for example. So we have a lot to do, and I hope that in planning for this, the policymakers are taking a completely holistic view of overhauling our health system to cope.
All right, Kingsley, we just hope that it doesn't get to a level where someone has to seek for medical attention at those primary healthcare facilities. We hope it doesn't get there, because some person talked about 2 days ago on the issue of community infection, which is very, very deadly, because of the lack of facilities we're talking about at that level of government.
But medical personnel are also been advised. We've had the experts here say, look, get your antenna up at all times. And so once you strongly suspect that, look, the signs that or the symptoms being manifested by these individuals are beyond the typical malaria and all of that, refer immediately. Yes, and I think that's very crucial. All right. Well, it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets that have come in, but we're going to take a short break now. When we return, we'll go to the tweets.
My name is Yemi Adetunji, the COO downstream of NNPC. Ever since the closure of the borders, we have seen a marked reduction, about 10%, in terms of the evacuation of what you call loadouts of PMS, which equates to about 6 million liters per day. Essentially because of the border closure, because of certain aspects we've also done as NNPC, working with our sister organizations, sister agencies, Nigerian Customs, DPR, Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and other agencies, and also what we call Operation White, which is an intervention we have put in place to trace and track every molecule of petroleum products as they arrive in country through the vessels, as they move through the depots, and as they are evacuated with trucks out of the depots.
To dey disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Well, we are back, and thank you for staying with us. Of course, we have tweets from Nigerians, and we will take time to read these tweets to you. There are many, but we'll go through all of them. We'll begin with Comrade Alaji Ngara. In some states, schools and NYSC camps were closed because of corona. Then, what is the stand of IDPs camps where thousands of people living together in one premises? There's nothing to panic because it is a natural phenomenon.
Now, the Reverend Mane Akman has this tweet. Nigerians need to be calm, but the buck stops with the government. They can either transmit calm or fear. the president needs to address the nation on the matter. Secondly, there has to be clear evidence that the government is on top of the situation. Kieran, I'd like to make a comment on this. Where you say that the buck stops with the government. In the issue of COVID-19, the buck doesn't stop with the government. We have heard it said repeatedly by senior government officials, and that's part of the message, that each of us has a responsibility in ensuring that there is no community transmission of coronavirus. Wash your hands, regularly with soap, and if you do observe any symptoms, self-isolate and get in touch with the health expert. Helplines have also been released. So the buck doesn't stop with the government with respect to coronavirus.
Yes, you have a role to play as well. Steve Bond, 007, we mustn't panic, but the airport should have been closed long ago. This is the time for the country to see and be reassured by her leader. How the government will manage or enforce a partial or total lockdown is still not clear.
We're not anywhere near a lockdown yet, Kieran. Yeah. All right, Dele Jack Solomon has this tweet. Feeling anxious during a disease outbreak like the coronavirus is normal. In fact, having some anxiety can motivate you to maintain good hygiene habits like washing hands more frequently and minimizing contact with other people. Let's all intensify efforts to play by the rules.
All right, Law Alpha C. It's commendable and relieving that the U.S., through President Trump, has introduced a particular drug that can cure the COVID-19, but that has not been clarified by WHO. You are talking about the chloroquine, which we read since yesterday that has been approved by President Trump. It's not been clarified, but I think WHO should be the organization to let the world know what that can be.
Well, I'm sure you know different countries are taking different approaches now, but working on a vaccine is ultimately more effective, but they're looking at 1 year to 18 months, for a more widely available vaccine. Perhaps the chloroquine, as you said, is now being repurposed. Chloroquine was originally for malaria. Now, Awal Garba has this tweet. Prayer and patience are key. Scientists are working 24/7 to ensure that drugs and vaccines are available. And the government, of course, still needs to do more in building more labs, most especially in some parts of the country. Those that are available should also be standardized.
Utolo Sunday, the situation is really devastating right now because just one day we recorded 5 cases, the following day another 4, and most states do not have isolation centers nor test kits. It is terrible and unimaginable right now. May God protect us. And that's a very good question he asked. Talking about testing kits,
That's right.
Very, very crucial. And at this moment, it's even scarce globally.
Absolutely, Kieran. Now, Oladimeji Morufu, Nigerians should remain calm. And in the olden days, our forefathers used to prepare concoction. The Yorubas call it agbotutu for unknown illnesses like this.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong, really, if you ask me, in bringing in the herbal medics in this mix, because they could have madam, you...
no, we're not Orthodox people.
The Orthodox, yes.
Orthodox people have this issue. That's the matter that we are pursuing.
Yes. Okay, Sagil Abatoko, there's no country in the world that can claim not to be panicky about this deadly disease called COVID-19. Citizens must be panicky so that government can take serious action on the pandemic disease. People would only calm down when the victims are recovered and their number is maintained.
Titus Mondenok. Now, we need not panic, but we should do the needful by observing basic hygiene rules, and thank God that some respite is coming from the USA, that chloroquine and her sister hydroxyl chloroquine could be potential treatment for COVID-19 before a vaccine is discovered.
Yerima Alhaji Hamza, we have to appreciate on the issue, rather be vigilant and encourage people to follow the preventive measures.
Abel Mark, that's the handle that says, please, the Italian man that was confirmed negative now should still self-isolate for at least a month. His viral load should be on constant watch. He should not be allowed to join the society now.
And Duheden Umar, there are instances that the disease doesn't kill, but the fear and anxiety about the illness does. We need public enlightenment. Health education will go a long way to eliminate panic and anxiety.
Chris Simeon, every cloud has its silver lining. No need to panic or worry about COVID-19 pandemic. the best thing to do is to maintain personal hygiene and avoid large crowds. It will go, that's COVID-19, at the appointed time. Ebola was like this, today it is no more.
Then, Agege, my opinion is we here in Nigeria don't know how to manage fear. If care is not taken, people will die of the fear than the virus itself.
Well, that's what the experts have been speaking to, okay? I mean, that's what they've been trying to explain to us. Ibrahim Bello. Now, there's need for all to remain focused and handle this pandemic head-on, because if we allow anxiety and fear to grip our minds, we may be playing dangerous. Nothing lasts forever, not even our worries.
All right, Abdul, while panic and anxiety can't be ruled out, we should be vigilant and cautious in our interactions, as long as every official saddled with the responsibility of checkmating the arrival of people into our country does his or her job with seriousness. No cause for alarm.
Now, Chibuzo says, I'm in panic thinking on how to get food or support if COVID-19 escalates. Just like Kingsley does say, death notice is what I'm saying. I didn't say death notice. So you're quoting me out of context or even totally misquoting me. We're saying that, look, we're putting the questions to the experts to respond to, and you can see the various assurances that they've been given. Let's have a clear understanding of these issues, and then we know appropriately how to respond. Listen to the experts, listen to instructions, and then each of us should assume a role in helping to prevent further spread of this virus.
All right, so Abdul Hamid Ado, he said, I agree with you. We really need to appreciate federal government's efforts. 1, screenings at international airports. 2, blood testing centers. 3, isolation centers. 4, presidential task force. 5, regular situation updates. 6, restriction of travels to risk countries. And 7, reduction of petrol price.
Now, Gaida Imamodu tweets, I think this issue of COVID-19 is, amongst Nigerians, it's over-exaggerated to the extent of